In this video tutorial, I'm going to look at JPA, which stands for Java Persistence API, with Hibernate and MySQL. This assumes that you have already looked at one of the previous tutorials where I install and set up MySQL database, and we got one table and a database as well. So the link is provided here, MySQL database beginner video tutorial. And also it assumes that you have looked at setting Java, Eclipse and Maven. So these are preliminary requirements before you can get on with this tutorial that talks about JPA with Hibernate. So before we look at the Java tutorial, let's have a look at the MySQL database. So I've opened DOS console and I need to run the environment setup.cmd command so that my MySQL home gets set up. You can also add this to the environment property on Windows, and you don't have to do that. But otherwise, I have a script where it sets up the tools home, it sets up the Java home, JRE home, MySQL home, and so on. So once that script is done, I just do a clear. And to start the MySQL server, as it was discussed here, this is the MySQL server. We already have a learn Java DB and a table called account. So you have to start the MySQL daemon D. So MySQL D -- console will start the MySQL server in port 3306. So I do MySQL D, which is D for daemon, -- console should start the server. So once that is starting, I will open another DOS command and write a client. See, it shows here 3306, it's running on that. So if I click CMD here and open another one, so I'm going to change directly to C scripts. That's where I have got my environment set up, and run the environment setup. So all the Java home, all the environment variables all set. Clear screen to CLS to clear the screen. And here what we need to run is the client. Because I'm running on the same server, I don't have to put the host or the port number or anything. Everything is running on my laptop. The client that is going to connect to the MySQL server is MySQL. I've already set up the user called user123 and -p for the password, and these all covered in detail in getting started with the MySQL database tutorial. So I go to my client and then I say MySQL -u for the user. I've already set up the user123 -p for the password, and the password we have set up is pwd123, and you get the MySQL prompt. So here, if you want to see all the databases, I can say show databases, and you got to end with a semicolon. So it shows these are the databases. These all came with the installation. Learn Java DB is the database that I created in the previous tutorial. And if I want to use this database, I say use learn Java DB. Now it will switch to that database. Now I can show all the tables in here. So if I say show tables, this should show all the tables in the database. I have only created one table called account. So if I want to see what the structure of that table is, I can say describe account. It shows we got 4 fields: ID, name and balance. ID and name are of varchar 30 and 50 respectively, and balance is of float. In hindsight, I should have created this with either double, but anyway, this is a simple tutorial, so balance, I've set it up as float. And if you want to see what records are there, because we have already looked at the JDBC connecting to this MySQL database, and we have created some records in the JDBC tutorial. So if I do select star from account, so we got 4 records, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records now. So as part of this tutorial that I'm going to create this record 234 CMON. So I'm going to delete it for now, so that we will create it through JPA and Hibernate. And also we'll be reading these records through JPA and Hibernate as well. So delete from account where ID equals 234. So we are going to delete just one record and end with a semicolon. So one row is affected, and if I do select again, so I'll get 4 records, and the 5th record, the CMON, is gone. Now the next step is, let's start it with JPA and Hibernate. So we have to create a new project now. So I'm going to go to now open another command, DOS command thing, and in this case I'm going to change it to the C projects folder, and I'm going to create a new Maven project using the Archetype plugin. So cd c2 projects, this is where we store all the projects. In one of the setting up Java projects, we clearly said projects directories for the project, scripts is to put any scripts in there, and tools is for all the tools like Maven, Eclipse, and so on. And the command to run the Maven thing is in here, so you can copy it from here. Maven archetype generate -b for in batch mode, so it won't stop for you to enter the version number and so on. And we also need to put the group ID. So Maven is everything is designed by group ID and the artifact ID. So group is com.mytutorial, and the artifact ID is simple-orm persistence. So I press enter, and Maven is going to create a skeleton project structure. So with Maven you can build your artifacts, you package it as a jar file, and so on. So Maven is doing a few downloads. So if you haven't already set up Maven, you go and look at the Maven tutorial, where step by step it shows how to set up Maven. So once the Maven has run, you can go into your C projects folder in Eclipse, and you can see, if I refresh it here, see there's a simple ORM persistence that was just created. And if I click on it, that's create a simple Maven structure. You'll have a basic pom.xml file, you'll have the source, main, Java folder, you'll have source, main, test folder, and so on. So now I go into Eclipse, I do file, import, and I'm going to import as an existing Maven project because we have already created a Maven structure. Next, then I go into browse, and I'm going to C projects folder and select simple-orm persistence, and then finish. Now we got the project here, simple Maven ORM. So it says M here. M is for a Mavenized project, J is for a Java project. So if I select the pom.xml file, it only has created a very basic pom.xml. Now we need to bring in the MySQL driver, Hibernate, JPA, all those required libraries inside the pom.xml file. So there are a number of changes that we need to make. This version also we need to upgrade that version, and also up the top we need to put some properties to say this is going to be a Java 8 project. So they're all here, so I can select on this, copy, Control C, and then the link for this code is provided below this video tutorial, so you can look at that. I'm going to do Control A and Control V and save. So let's go through one by one. So here we got some properties saying that compiler we're going to use is 1.8. The Maven compiler target for these all Maven related stuff to say use 1.8. And here is to say we're going to run it as a Java 1.8. And then we also got a JUnit which is upgraded to 4.12. Then obviously we need the MySQL driver. We already saw that in JDBC tutorial you need a driver to talk to a particular database. If it is an Oracle, you need an Oracle driver. If it is a Sybase, you need a Sybase driver. And in this case we are using a MySQL, so you need the MySQL driver. So we have, how do we know that which version and thing to do? I'll show it with one of the other examples. Say for example here we also need a Hibernate connection pool. So connection pool will give you a pool of connections, And then with the entity manager, you can say, okay, for every request, you can use a connection, pool of connections. So connection is an expensive object. You don't want to create it every time. So you want to create it and keep it in a pool and keep reusing it. So that's what the connection pool is for. Like for in multi-threading, you create a thread of pools because some of the resources like file handles, threads, connections, they are very expensive and scarce resource. And once you create it, you pool them and you reuse them. And then here, obviously, this is the Hibernate Java Persistence API we are using, and also we're using the Hibernate API. So when we are using a Hibernate, what we need to do is, because we are also using the Persistence API, the Hibernate, this particular Maven thing will automatically bring in the Hibernate JPA 2.1 API, which conflicts with this API. So we need to exclude them in Maven. So now let's see, how do we know what version, latest version to do? So normally what I do is, if I know it's a Hibernate Entity Manager, you do Control-C, select this. And you can go to the Maven repository, so which is search.maven.org. And I type A for the artifact, then colon, and press Control-V. And do a search. So this should tell me org.hibernate is the group ID. Artifact it is Hibernate-Entity Manager. And the version is 5.20.10 final. That's a final version. If I want to know the previous versions, I can select all, and these are the previous versions. So anything that you define in here, you can always go and check the versions and see you're using the latest version, so that any of the bugs or things like that would have been ironed out. You can do the same for the Java Persistence API, and everything you define here, you can always go and, if you want to search by group ID, you put group colon and then put the name. And also if it is an artifact ID, you put A colon and search a name here. So now we got the pom.xml file sorted. So what we have after that is a shared plugin. Shared plugin is to create an Uber jar. Is basically you can package all your third-party libraries and the code you are writing into one big jar file. So this is an alternative to creating a WAR file or whatever. So because normally you can't have a jar within a jar. So what this shared plugin does is unwraps all the third-party library jars, takes all the packages, and looks at your project, and whatever you define in your own project packages, look at them and put them all into just one jar file. So you will have different packages, and within those packages you will have all the artifacts. So once you have done that, you will see that still it is showing here as J2SE 1.5. So what you need to do is you select the project, because the POM file hasn't been refreshed already in here. So what you need to do is right click on it and click on Maven, and then click on Update Project. So you update this particular project, and you will see the Maven is running now. See, it's changed to 1.8. So not only this one changed to 1.8, and also if you look into the Maven dependencies, you will see all those dependencies have been brought in. Here's our Hibernate Entity Manager 520 final jar, that's what we mentioned. And also there should be a API document as well. So there's Persistence API here 1.02. And because we have already excluded the Persistence Hibernate JPA Persistence API, that Hibernate request will bring in. And Hibernate uses Java Assist and other libraries, so it has gone and brought in whatever it requires to operate. So now we got all our jar files and dependencies sorted out. Now we are ready to start with the JPA configuration file. So what we need to do is, as a next step, we need to create this persistence.xml file, and that needs to be in the source main resources folder under meta-inf. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do copy here, Control-C, and I'm going back to my Eclipse. There's no source main resources folder created. So what I do is select the project, right click on it, source, no, I think you need to do build path and create a new source folder. So you right click on it, new, and then source folder, and that source folder is going to call source/main/resources, and this will be in the class path. So if you create it as a source folder, it goes into the class path. So that will be in the class path. So if you want to see what's in the class path, you right click on the project, click on properties and Java build path, and if you go into the source you can see what's in the Java source. So this project name source main Java is in the class path, source main resources is in the class path, and source test Java is in the class path. These are the things in the class path, and when you compile it they will go into target classes folder. So these are the .java files and this is where the .class files will go in. And also you can see the projects and the libraries. You can also look at the libraries here. These are the libraries we're going to use, and also this is the Java 1.8 we're going to use. So once that's done, we're going to create a meta in folder, because the persistence.xml file, which is a JPA file, JPA is going to use this, and we have to put that in the meta in folder. So we go source new, we're going to create a folder here, new folder, and this folder will go inside. This is called metainf, meta-inf, and just finish. And I'm going to create a new file here. Right click on metainf, new, and file, and it is going to be called persistence.xml. And finish. Oops, I put CML, so I have to rename it. Right click on the file, refactor, and rename. And I'm going to change this CML to XML and say OK. Then I do Control V because I've already copied the file, and I'm going to save it. Let's look at this file now. So I'm going to open it again so it looks like XML. So you go open again. Okay, now it reads it as XML. So first we are saying who the provider is, because JPA is an interface and an API. You can have different providers. In this case we are going to use Hibernate as a provider. So you're going to say the provider is going to be org Hibernate JPA, Hibernate persistence provider. And also you need to have a persistence unit, and the unit has to have a name, because when we get the entity manager factory we then get it by the unit name. So this is going to call the JPA-example. You can give whatever name you like, but in this case we are calling it JPA-example. So once you have set up the persistence unit, inside that you're going to say who the provider is, and then we need to know how to connect to the MySQL database. So we already have a MySQL database running here. So it's a local host and on port number 3306. So similar to the way that we did for the JDBC, how to connect, so we need to give it the required properties. So in this case, we are saying JavaX represents the JDBC URL. It is going to be JDBC : MySQL, because we are using MySQL database. So if it is an Oracle or Sybase, it will be different. Then local host, because this is the machine that MySQL server is running. 3306 is the port number where the server is running, and learn Java DB is the database that we created. So we saw earlier in the show databases is called the learn Java DB. Obviously we get to give the username and the password. So we created is user123 and the password is pwd123. And then we also need a driver. So depending on what database you are using, here is a MySQL, and we have put the driver as well. Now this is a very important feature. The Hibernate.showSQL is a feature for debugging, because Hibernate under the covers, when you map an object and then you tell Hibernate to save this to a database or whatever, under the covers Hibernate is going to create all the insert statement or select statement or whatever, depending on what type of CRUD operation is going to perform. And it's always for tuning purpose or for understanding what's happening under the covers. If we say true, Hibernate is going to print the actual SQL, is going to execute it on your behalf. So with Hibernate, or Hibernate is an ORM tool, object relational mapping tool, you don't have to write any SQL, and Hibernate is responsible for it. So you tell an object and you annotate that and you map your object attributes to the database columns, and Hibernate will take care of generating the SQL for you. That's the power of the ORM tool. So in this case, because we are saying show SQL true, if we say false, it's not going to print any SQL statement. It says true, it's going to print it. And format is also if you need to format the output. And then obviously you got to say what dialect it is, because Hibernate supports Sybase, Oracle, and all the other commercial databases. So in this case we are saying we are going to support the MySQL database dialect. And then below here, because we are using a Hibernate connection pool, we got to say what's the minimum size. He's saying 5 is the minimum number of connection, and up to maximum connection is 20. And if a particular database call is going to take more than 500 I think it's millisecond or whatever, is to timeout, and how many statements to create, and so on. So these are basically configuration. You can tune them depending on what type of performance you need out of your connection pool. So now we have got the persistence XML sorted. So the next step is we are going to create a persistence manager. A persistence manager is the one which is going to do the connectivity. So you need something to connect. So here it's going to use a JPA example. We have already used this JPA example as the persistence unit. So to create that, before I do that, so always we saw in one of the previous tutorials is always you create different packages to source. So for example, if you want to put data access objects, you create the DAO package. For all your models, you create a model package. All your utils, you create a util package, and so on. So here I'm going to create 3 packages. One is called, inside here already got my.com tutorial, so I'm going to say new, and I'm going to call it package. And one is going to call util. This is where we put some util classes like a persistence entity manager or whatever. And then I'm going to right click on the com.mytutorial again, and I'm going to say new, and I'm going to say package here. I need a package for the main, so I can put my main class. That's where the class that's going to run. So I've got a main method in it. Then here I'm going to write new, and I'm going to go call it a package. And here I'm going to call it model. So this is where we put account.java, which is the model. And then finally also we need the DAO, which is for data access object. This is where we will be making database calls, so the CRUD operation. So here you do main package, and I'm going to call it .dao. So we got all the packages nicely organized for different, and now I'm going to copy this, and we're going to create the Java persistence manager. This is a singleton enum class, so I'm going to do Control C, and I'm going to go here. This is going to go into util. I'm going to right click on it and new, and I'm going to not create a class, I'm going to create an enum. This is like a singleton. This is a very simple tutorial, so I'm going to, and this is called the persistence manager. So I'm going to go finish. So basic class is created. So I'm going to do Control A and Control V, copy this and save it. So you can see as like E here is saying it's in enum. So in the enum, instance is nothing but it's like having a public static final instance of this persistence manager itself. And then you have the entity manager factory. So entity manager factory is like a factory that knows connection. It connects to your database, and it makes use of the JPA example. We have in the persistence.xml file the JPA persistence unit. The JPA persistence unit is the one which contains all these properties, so it knows how to connect. So it's going to use this persistent JPA example persistence unit and all the properties to create the factory. And then you say the factory to create an entity manager. You can create an entity manager from the factory. So the entity manager is always tied up to a factory. And this is a method, once you're done with everything, you want to close the factory. You don't want to use entity manager JPA or Hibernate anymore. You just close it. So we got the persistence manager done. The next important step is to create the model. So in the model is we're going to call it new class. It's called the account, because the table account, we're going to map the table account to an object called account.java. And important thing with this object is you need to put some annotation so that Hibernate knows which table it maps to and how to map the columns and so on. So here I'll go back to my step-by-step tutorial here. I'm going to copy this, Control C, and I'm going to paste it here for the account, and we'll look at this class. So to tell Hibernate, this is an entity that we in Hibernate should look at it. So we annotated with @entity, which is the JPA annotation, and under the covers Hibernate will look at it because Hibernate implements the JPA interface. And then we can say the table name. So you're going to say @table is going to account, because we already looked at the table we're going to connect to is the account table. And then we start defining the account class. ID, because everything should have a primary key. So Hibernate needs to know it's identified by an ID. So you create @ID. You can put additional parameters to say auto generate this ID, or you can set the ID when you create this object. You can set your own ID. And because its names are same, say for example in here you want to call it something else, and in the table is going to be something, you need to put an @column annotation. In this case, name and balance are same as the columns that we have created, say name and balance. So we don't have to really annotate it and say it's going to be a name or balance as such. But if you want to call it something differently, then you can always here put @ then say COL, then press Control space to get the code assist, and there should be one thing called column, and within the bracket say I can say this has to map to a column named name. I think it's going to be called value equals name. Okay, name equals name. So something like that. So you can define your column. So this can be different names, but if we don't have this annotation, Hibernate will assume that name is the name of the column that's in the database table. So we'll take this out because our database table column names and the one in the Java object are the same. So what we have basically done is created an object, and we have annotated with some JPA annotation that Hibernate also knows how to look at this, because Hibernate implements the JPA, and then Hibernate knows what SQL to generate and how to talk to the database and how to retrieve, how to save, and so on. So we got the model class out of the way, and next step is to go and create the DAO object, data access object. So DAO, basically you code to interface. So you first define an interface, and we need two methods. Here we're going to write two methods. One is get accounts. That's so that we can get all the accounts that are in the database, so all these accounts here. And the next method is to save account. So we'll create a new object, and then we'll tell Hibernate, give it to Hibernate Entity Manager and say save this into the database, and we will see that record gets entered into the database. So now, if we go into here, I'm going to copy this, Control C, then we already have a DAO package created to save all the DAO classes. So I do right click on the DAO, new, in this case is called an interface. I'm going to call it account DAO. So finish this. I'm going to paste that whatever we copied. We got two interfaces. Now we need to create an implementation that implements this interface. So we create file, new class. I'm going to call it account DAO impl, and here in the interfaces I can go add and say I want to implement the account DAO. So account DAO is the interface and this is the implementation, and then go finish. Now you will see automatically it created the skeleton methods because it knows it implementing the account DAO. It knows the signature, so automatically says okay, I'll give you the skeleton implementation. It's overriding the interface, and then say you go and fill whatever you want to do with it. Because we already know that here, so I'm going to do Control A and Control V. Oops, sorry, I didn't copy the other one, so I got to go here and click on this to copy, Control C, and I go here, Control A and Control V. So we have already now implemented the account DAO. So let's see what we have implemented here. So to get the accounts, what we are doing, it is from the util class we already created persistence manager.instance. That's the one which look at the instance, because basically create a single instance of this persistence manager. and then we are saying to the instance get the entity manager. So there's the persistent manager got a method called get entity manager that look at the factory and it creates an instance for you. The factory is created via the persistence.xml file which got the persistence unit of JPA example. So once you get the entity manager, then you create a thing called create query. So because in this case you're going to create the table, account table, and say give me everything that's in the table. So this is not a really an SQL. So this is called the ORM query language. So it's a bit like an SQL. So you're saying select everything from account. So account is A. So it says give me the whole object of A, which is the account. So what Hibernate is going to do is it's going to read this, and we already said this account is mapped to our this account.java here. So it's going to automatically read it. So in the JDBC example is cumbersome. We did the reading, and then we read one value at a time, and even create an instance of an object and set one value one by one. Here what you do is you write this entity manager, you create query and say what type of query you want, which is a Hibernate query language, and it will automatically take this and map to the object of type A account. And then you say get a query list, it will give you a list of accounts. So automatically when this result is returned, you will get all these 4 entries mapped to the account.java object with all these attributes, get ID, name and balance already set, and you will just return a list of objects. That's why it's called the object to relational mapping, because you're looking at the relational database, taking all the values, and Hibernate is mapping that because it got these annotations, it knows what column to look at and all those stuff, and it's mapping it and giving you the results straight away. And in the other way around, if you want to create a new object, all you do is you create an object in the Java layer, and then you pass it to you create the entity manager same as here, and then you create the transaction because you need to run normally things in a transactional context. So you get a transaction and begin the transaction here. This extra semicolon is not required. Then you say persist. Persist is going to write to the database actually. So Hibernate is going to write the insert query for you. And then you say commit. Your transaction is committed. And then return true is to say that record has been saved. So now finally what we need to do is we need to write the main class that's going to use this get accounts and save account method. So we go here, look at this main method, JP example, which got a main method which makes use of the DAO. So I copy this, Control C, and I'm going to go to this and to the main package. So where's the main package? Let's close this. Here's the main package. Right click, new class, and this is going to be called JPA example. If you look at one of the previous tutorials where we did the JDBC, where you can see how concise this Hibernate is because the framework is doing the bulk of the work for you. So I'm going to press this Control V. In JDBC you need to do everything one by one yourself. Okay, so here we typed something incorrectly here. Okay, I just want to make sure this code is right, doesn't have the JP example now. Okay, so let's look at this code here. So it's basically a very simple class with the main method. You're creating an instance of account DAO. So account DAO impl is where you got all the get account and save methods. The get account DAO, you're coding to the interface. Is always a best practice to go to an interface, and then you're creating an implementation instance of that implementation. Then you are calling DAO.getAccounts, and all it does is gets you a list of accounts, and we are printing these accounts just to see whether it can read all these accounts via Hibernate, and it will print it for you. The next step what we are going to do is we are creating an account object. So we're creating account, new account is equal to new account. So this is the account object. We put all the Hibernate annotations and we set the value. So we're going to set this new account, set ID is 234, ID is a string type, so 234. We are setting a name is Simon, and we are setting a set balance which is $356, and it is of type float and F. Then what we are doing is passing the DAO.save account and passing this new account to the save account method. So this account will come in and Hibernate will take it, create a new transaction, save it to the database, commit to the database, and then return true if it is successful. So that's what it is doing. So once now we have saved it, we are making another call to DAO.getAccounts again. So we can see that before it shows you 1, 2, 3, 4, and then after that saving it, it should return you 5 accounts. So we are printing it again, and then once we are done with all our examples, we are just closing because we don't need the Hibernate entity manager factory again. So manager, so we are closing the manager. So it's all done now. So we're ready to run this. So I'm going to go here. JPA example is where the main method is, because any other method you right click and try to say run as, it won't show you the Java application. It will say on the server and so on. But if you select a class that has the main method, you can right click on it and you can say run as, and you can select Java application. So I'm running this as a Java application. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to maximize this console. So Hibernate is doing its all magic. So now I showed earlier that in the persistent.xml, if you say show SQL to true, it will show you the SQL. So in first instance, Hibernate has sent a select star from C. Here says one by one it has picked up which columns it needs. But here what we have defined is, we didn't specifically say what columns we need. We said we want the whole object. So if you go to account DAO impl, here we said select from account A. So account itself, whatever the Hibernate object account is, and table is obviously that account object is mapped to the table account. So here say get me from the account object all the accounts in A. So if you want a particular one, you can say a.id or whatever. So in this case I want the ID, name and balance, so I just leave it as A. So and if I save this, and if I double click on it and I'll bring the console, double click on the console, it comes back again. So this is the select query it has done. So this is before saving, and here you can see because we are printing it, we got ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 999. So these are the 4 accounts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 99. These are the 4 accounts that we create. We can select before we created a new one. So we got 4 records here up to 999. Then see here we are doing a saving. So we are saving Simon with what are we doing here? Let me check again. Double click on that and we look at the JPA example main. We are getting 234 Simon and $356. So if I go and double click on the console again, so it says it has created an insert query. So this is like a prepared statement. We already looked at this in the JDBC example. So, but in this case, you didn't have to create this. Hibernate has created this for you. And you can see Hibernate inserted it. And then now you're doing a select again, because in the code we are doing another select to see the new record has been added. So here you can see the same 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9. You got 999. In addition to that, now you got the new one that you added here, so which is the one ID is 234, name is Simon and balance is $356. So if I double click on again to minimize this and go to JPA example, that's why we added 234. So we are doing a save here and we are reading it back again. So it's all looking good. Now in order to confirm that it has gone into the database, let's go in here. And if I do another select, so now we are doing it on the database itself from console, select star. So this is basically the client, and this is where the server is running here. So this is, you can think of it as, this is the client. This is where I'm running the SQL queries, MySQL client, and MySQL daemon is what we start at the beginning with MySQL daemon -- console. So server is already running, and initially when I did the Java application here via Hibernate and Java application, I came across here via TCP/IP and using the driver and so on to connect, and I saved a new record, I read the records and so on. Now what I'm doing is using the console client, not the Java application. So you can think of Java application here as one of the other clients. Now I'm going to use the console client to see whether this Java application, that's JPA example that I wrote, has saved everything to the database. So there's another verification. So I'm going to go here, select star from, and I call account. And here I can say 234 Simon. Now if I try to run it again, because this 234 is already there, and if I run it again, and this is might fail because it's already saved. So if let's try. So if I go and right click on it and run as Java application again, and double click on the console and see what happens. Okay, so it has tried to insert it again. It's already there. It wouldn't create a new record, obviously, because it's using that as an ID. No, it has created. Okay, it has created two. Okay, so the reason it has created another record with the same ID is because when I set up the database, I did not define ID as the primary key. So even though in Hibernate they are saying ID is the ID to use ID as the identifier, but on the database side I haven't put any constraints or restrictions to say not to allow multiple IDs with the same ID. So if I had done so that in the database side, because there's no primary key defined, then wouldn't have allowed me to create multiple accounts with the same ID. So now if I go and select here, you will see 6 rows, but you will have 2 items with the same record, 234 Simon and 356. So if I do this here, see now I've got 6 records, 234, both are Simon and 356. So this is one of the caveats. So when you design databases, it's very important you put your constraints. So this ID should have been a primary key. So now I can run any number of times. It's going to keep on creating new records one after the other. But if I had created the ID as the primary key, then you will get an error saying that unique constraints violated or primary key constraint violated. So that's all for this. So what we have done is we have created a very simple Java application. We have put them into proper packages. We created the DAO and everything. So what we need to do is in the future tutorials, then we will have Spring. So we can use the Spring to manage your Hibernate and JPA. Spring will take care of the transaction manager. And then in a typical Java application, what you will be doing is you will be having RESTful web services. We have already done some tutorials on RESTful web service. And in future tutorial, I'm going to putting it all together kind of tutorial where you start with the RESTful web service. Then RESTful web service layer will call the DAO layer. The DAO layer will use JPA and Hibernate. It will go to the database, save records, read records, and so on. So this is where the typical Java developer will be doing from RESTful service all the way to the DAO layer, use the Hibernate, save it to the database and retrieve from database and so on. And these RESTful web services can be used by, if you are using Spring MVC as your model view controller with Timely for JSP. I already have some tutorials there. You can look at that. That will call the RESTful web service call for the data. Or you can use something like an AngularJS as the client. And AngularJS is like an MVC client, like a web page, web client. And that will make RESTful web services call. It will save records to the database and read from database and so on. So we will see in a new tutorial where we'll be looking at RESTful web services with JPA and Hibernate.